So, Kyle, could you kind of refresh us on the trademark story?
Sure. So it was originally designed as STEM Scouts. I was at a NASA, one of many they have STEM workshops and STEM summits and STEM everything because this is a big problem. And it occurred to me that there should be a program where badging, and when I'll get into details about why. But the Boy Scouts fought my trademark. Technically, their trademark, my trademark wouldn't really impinge on their trademark, but Congress gave special powers. And it's true, that's the word their lawyers use, but they have special powers that make their trademarks even stickier and harder to work around than others. So there was Hack Scouts and Scouts and STEM Scouts that all sprung up over the last 2 years. And all of us are now forced to change our name. So we became DIY for Do-It-Yourself STEM. And STEM, for those of you, I think everybody probably knows STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's a problem that the country's had for quite a while here. It's a problem that existed back, it was first really brought to attention in 1958. And there was the big Soviet-U.S. thing, and I know you guys weren't around then. I was a kid at that point. But we've known for a long time that STEM is important. STEM leads to innovation, STEM leads to progress, STEM leads to security, STEM leads to a lot of good things. But for all that time, we haven't made much progress, partly because STEM is perceived by kids as hard. It's difficult. Science and math are the two subjects that people find most difficult. There's also some kind of bullying that goes on, intimidation if you're interested in STEM. People kind of ostracize you and so on. A lot of different factors there. And I think part of it is that, kids get interested in STEM, and then maintaining an interest in STEM requires a constant throughput. So we probably all had at least one great science or math teacher. And during that time we were into it, but then you change to a new teacher and there's a disconnect and it really kind of falls apart. So we need to really do something that is going to be systemic, meaning across the nation and across school and in school, outside of school, something that's really powerful if we're going to make a difference here. So we decided that we would produce something that's now called DIY STEM that would be a collaboration. If you think of all the people who care about and have interest in STEM and know STEM, what if we were able to create a partnership that really brought engineers and scientists from corporations, from universities, from the U.S. government agencies, from the military, and really got everybody who's really interested in STEM to be a producer, to be producing value in this big nationwide support system. So the idea was that, and the idea is evolving. So we thought we would come up with this great idea. Say fundraising people would go out and millions of dollars would come in and we would run this whole thing from here. Well, it turns out, and we also submitted a thing to the MacArthur badging competition, and the question I have is, I think everybody's intimidated by the scale of this. And I think also that there's the biggest question we've received is, if you build it, will they come? Are kids really going to spend their discretionary time this way? And I think for those of us who are kind of tinkerers and makers, there's no doubt in our minds that if we give kids cool things to do and people to talk to about them, that they will do them, and it will happen. But so now we're kind of switching to a crowdsourcing model where we're going to be calling on corporations and government agencies and stuff, not just to give us money, but to actually fill out this form and create a badge, create an activity for kids, and to volunteer mentors to work online and things like that. So rather than just saying we're going to scoop up millions of dollars from all these different sources, we're going to say we're going to scoop up the energy of everybody who cares about STEM enough to really make a contribution. So we're really trying to create this long-term engagement. And to do that, we need activities that'll grab people right then, but then we also need them to have a sense of progress. This is working for me. I'm getting smarter. I'm getting more capable. And I have a community of other students. I'm not the weird one. There are actually 3,000 other kids just like me, 3,000 other girls who are interested in entomology, interested in meteorology, interested in whatever ology you want. So we want to show them the breath, and we want to let them sample and find out what is chemistry like, what is mechanics like, what's engineering, what are all these things, and which of those really speak to me. So we know that there is, this is serious learning that we're trying to make happen here, and we know that you guys are educators, and so we know that you understand that there are different types of learning outcomes that we need to attend to if we're really going to help people become. I'm looking for develop self-efficacy. We've been using the term STEM self-efficacy. I feel good. I'm a capable person. I can figure this out. I can go ahead and make something that'll open my chicken coop door when the sun, comes up and close it when the sun goes down. I can do that. That's something I can do. So we understand these different types of learning outcomes, and we've decided to create badges that kind of reflect that. We want kids operating on all of this. So we also, there's a new framework that just came out for K-12 science education, just came out, it's now 2 years old. But they really talked about what kinds of things kids should know and be able to do. And they actually have a scientific process that scientists go through and an engineering process, a set of steps engineers go through. So we're trying to sort of merge those different kinds of learning outcomes with these processes for scientists and engineers. And what we come up with is a hierarchy of badges that are really based on that hierarchy that I showed you before. But and this is something that we wondered about and argued about, and Brad won. So this is Brad Zdenek, by the way. He's been working with me the whole time on this. And John Wise, who's not with Penn State anymore, was also one of the founders of this. And we argued about, well, where do you meet them? You start with having them learn the knowledge, so then they can do the projects, and it makes sense. But Brad said, no, you start with projects. You start with these project patches, where you actually build a solar car. You take the gears and the wheels and the motor and you put it together and you add you use batteries and you plug it into the wall and you use a solar panel and you have it pull against the spring scale to see how powerful it is in each of these circumstances and gear configurations. And now that you've done something, we can go ahead and get you to pay attention to the knowledge that's behind that. So after you've built this car and tried some different gear configurations, or actually we try to get them to go wild on it, so that while they're building the car, it says, now you're going to put gears together. Put them together this way, put them together this way. Now would be a good time for you to go out and learn about gear ratios. So we have these NATOMs, these knowledge atoms, these little building blocks of knowledge that we're saying that you can go out and learn and earn badges for these, okay? By the way, I should have started by saying, we know you guys understand gaming better than we do. And one of the things we're looking for in this conversation is we'll sort of lay out what we're doing and welcome any advice you can give us for ways we might make this more compelling. But the idea is you can earn a project patch for doing a project successfully and writing it up, and then you can earn these NATOMs, these knowledge atoms by, and Brad will show you in a moment. I'll turn it over to Brad, and he'll do a website demo by going out and reading the objectives and watching YouTube movies and videos and then taking quizzes online. You can earn these NATOMs, these knowledge atoms. You've mastered knowledge. And then we move up to these molecules. When you have sets of NATOMs, we'll kind of use the gamification levels kind of a thing. If you have, the DC direct current and the AC and the current and the capacitor and whatever, then that's like an Electronics 1 badge. And if you move over and you start using an Arduino and controlling things, that's an Electronics 2 badge. And so we have these different clusters of things that we've put together in the form of knowledge molecules that are related to and designed to do that. We're going to fly past those project patches because there's something above that. So we kind of start in the middle, and then hope we can get them to go down and learn the knowledge and gather clusters of knowledge. Then we have this category. If you remember back up that Bloom's taxonomy, you want people to synthesize things, and you want them to integrate, and you want them to create with what they know. So here we're trying to get them to say, okay, so we gave you this solar car, and we gave you the parts. You have the gears, you have the wheels, you have the solar panels. And then the next thing, we gave you this Arduino. You have this Arduino microcontroller and a set of sensors and other things. And now, what are you going to do with that? We're not even going to say do it now, but we want them to say, you know what? I could take the gears from that thing and that microcontroller, and I could make something that whatever. So we want them to take what they learn in all these things, and maybe even the parts that they accumulate as they build and as they take things apart and as they do other things, and just set out to accomplish something on their own. So that we're holding up as like an even higher level accomplishment, that you to actually internalize it and create with it is what we're looking for here. And then we have these things at the top that, again, nobody's ever earned yet. We don't know if anybody will ever get there, but the idea is if you get maker medals and, from different sort of disciplines, or if you get some combination of those other higher order things, there will be this other level that we would bestow on people that says, you have reached the ultimate level of demonstration that you are capable, worldwide person in the field of STEM. So I'm going to bump through just a couple quick more slides, and then we'll give it to Brad. Obviously, you would have to measure these things in different ways. The knowledge and basic skills, actually, I copied this graphic. I put a graphic on here that was missing a column. This assessed by was another column. I did this in a hurry, getting rid of the STEM Scouts thing and putting DIY STEM in for the session. So basically, the knowledge and basic skills would be another column on the right that says those could be tested online. So you can do online quizzes about that stuff. That's pretty easy. But then you get into the project patches, you'd have some mentor looking at whether they put those together. You need mentors really understanding and working with them as they move through. The maker medals would go through that engineering process, where you propose what you want to do, and you do a prototype, and you end up submitting, publishing to the world what you've done in one form or another. We're thinking videos. So there's another big piece of this, which was mentoring, and the idea would be that there might be different kinds of mentors. So it might be somebody who stays with the Quadcopter badge. That would probably be Brad, since he built some on his own, things like that. But somebody who might stick with a particular piece of content, so if kids have a question about that, they could contact you. But there'd also be a mentor that is sort of like a big brother kind of thing. Not big brother in that I'm looking down at you, like the big brother, big sisters thing, where you sort of adopt a few kids that are interested. So if you're interested in this, you could have like 4 or 5 kids that you touch base with once a week through Skype, just to say, how's it going? Now, this brings in a lot of security clearances and other things, other issues. But I think the power would be great, because then as a kid moves from one teacher to another teacher, theoretically, these could be long, multi-year contacts with real scientists, engineers, or people who are just makers, the guys, the tinkerers, all the different kinds of people out there could really create long-term relationships. 5 to 10 steps, 1 to 2 hours a week. You set up appointments and just boom, Skype in with you. Hey, how's it going? Are you having any issues? What are you working on? What do you think you're going to do next? That's great. And by the way, I want to connect you with him because has some interest in the same thing. Oh, well, Brad can mention the social networking possibilities with that too, where you can find other kids who've earned the same badges you have and develop relationships there. Well, that's kind of where we're going next anyway. So you would have these online learning communities where you could. This is an image from one that we used in NASA. I just repurposed it. There's another STEM Scouts I need to get out. Anyway,
no one hears with Boy Scouts in America.
Yeah, there are some of these networks where you are plotted in the middle, and the other people around you, based on your interests or other things, people most like you in terms of STEM interests would be over in this quadrant, and the other outside interests are here. And plans for the future, things you'd like to learn more about. So you can find other people who are like you through that kind of an interface as well. And then we want to use some sort of badging and recognition for the mentors and for the organizations that jump in, for people who create, badges for us, and people who create multiple badges and things like that. So we want to use some sort of gamification and incentive or recognition. I like to think of it more as recognition than incentive. So that they can put this on their resume too, that I've created 5 of these badges that are used by STEM Scouts. So there are all kinds of issues about, now we've turned this into a grand crowdsourcing partnership. We would want to review everything before it goes live. We want everybody to know that, but anybody who created something, if Alcoa scientists created something on geology, we would put the Alcoa logo on there with a link back to Alcoa. And, they would, maybe even get to, I don't know, we'd have to talk about whether they get email addresses of the kids who have, done their badges or something. Because it's potential recruiting. A lot of people are saying that the data out of this, for colleges to recruit students, based on their accomplishments in this would be something that would be very desirable. So that's kind of what we had in mind. At that point, I'll turn it over to Brad, who will sort of run you through the website, and then we'll toss it open for conversation. Unless anybody have questions at this point?
I'm going to say real quick before we get into the actual application, what this is looking like on the web as it is right now. Any questions about kind of the idea behind DIY STEM and what we're trying to do?
And I was going to say, anyone with questions out there in phone land, please put them in the chat room.
I have one quick question. I see a lot of like the delineation between the mentors and the students. Have you thought about how you might promote students to get into that mentor role? And the second thing I was thinking about is, you have a lot of badges for content, but sometimes a big piece of this is how well you connect with others. And I was wondering if you had like a set of badges. Maybe you're going to answer that, but those are two
No,
things that
I mean we have not gone there, but I like that idea, and I think we were just talking about doing that with we were just talking about doing that on it. Was it on this one or making some? Oh no, I was talking with Adelina Ristova this morning about peer assessment in MOOCs, and how even there, where you have students reviewing other students' work, you want to use badges, and we were thinking about using badges for the quality based on the quality of feedback, and finding some sort of mechanical way to look across the thousands of people that are in MOOCs to do that.
Right.
So that's why I knew I was just talking about that. What was it? It had to be here. It couldn't have been here. Okay. But that's a really good suggestion.
I really see three different types of badges in here, and quite honestly, this is one of the areas where I see the digital badging world really trying to work through, because there's a lot of confusion and conflating of badges for recognition, badges for reward, and badges for competency. And those are three very different things. And quite honestly, we integrate all three of those within the DIY STEM program, and I don't necessarily think that we have figured out exactly how to separate those yet. Because quite honestly, we can have two badges side by side that look very, very similar visually, but they mean two very different things. One says that I have demonstrated competency in the area of Ohm's law. I know what Ohm's law is, I can apply it, I can use it, I have demonstrated this competency in DIY STEM, and I'm going to apologize because I'm going to say STEM Scouts 15 times. And DIY STEM has acknowledged that, it has certified that I know this. Right next to a badge, it looks very, very similar that says, I clicked on 15 links in the forum today. Those mean two very different things, but we haven't quite worked through, and we're still in pilot phase, we haven't quite worked through how to separate those out. But in response to your question, I see a role for the recognition type badges of, I have volunteered my time to act as a participant mentor, or whatever name we might attach. Kyle is great at coming up with names, so I'm sure he's got some snappy name to use for those individuals. But those individuals who have gone through the DIY STEM program and then come back and said, I will mentor those just like me that are just getting into the program. And they'd have those type of recognition badges.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons badges emerged is that so employers are behind this. The programming community really brought this out, because a lot of people develop a lot of skills that don't get documented any other way. But the employers are often saying that what they want is the soft skill. They'll take our word for it in terms of the actual credentials that academic institutions hand out, but they don't know if someone has empathy, if someone is a good worker, if someone is globally aware, if someone's not sexist or whatever. I mean, there are all kinds of things they care about deeply that are not documented in a grade. And so I think that there would be a lot of value in saying, not only is this person really productive in terms of knowledge and skill and creativity and application, but this is somebody that others respect in the community and that has made certain key contributions. So I try and resist leveling those badges. So like, these are the knowledge badges, these are the creativity badges, and then there are the social badges down here. It's really like they are different pots, and there's a reason to make them look different, and to really value all three of those. That's really a good suggestion. We should get there.
Yeah.
And it seems like, because Brett and I were just talking about this, if you're able to get concepts across to others, I mean, we all know this in education, but there is something really valuable in that, which, you know, I think we need to acknowledge. I'm definitely with you, but I really think it is a tool that some people use to get a deeper knowledge of these different areas.
Yeah. So in the MOOC data, which Bart was showing me the other day, I think in the next room over, they have these things called reputation points that Coursera gives, and it's really based on when you comment in the forum, they give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But it's got to be a lot smarter than that, because people who are honest and right telling you they don't like your work get a lot of thumbs down. So I looked at one of the bottom 50. We looked through the bottom 50 people. And one of the bottom scorers, actually, I thought did a really good job, but chose some unfortunate words, you know, in terms of describing the person's work. Like, this is junk. You didn't read the assignment, you know, da 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 da. But that person had a whole lot of very positive points and a whole lot of very negative points. But that person was a good reviewer, just needed a little coaching. And yeah, so thank you for that. That's a good suggestion.
And one of the ways that digital badges, the way Mozilla and all the rest of the groups that have worked on building this digital badging infrastructure, one of the nice things they've done is, you know, the incorporation of this metadata. So you can click on a badge, no matter what it looks like, and see, you know, how did that group that gave it operationalize this concept. So, you know, we can do that. Again, it's the question of the visual appearance, whether you should make distinctions between them, or whether you just, you know, want the employers or universities or whoever to click on the badge and see what's behind it. But again, I think that's a lot of what digital badging is working through right now and moving forward on. And as more and more organizations like us and much larger organizations implement these digital badges, I think it'll come out in the wash.
And that's there's lots of room there to do a peer, a peer-nominated, boy, he really explained that to me well. I'm going to give you some sort of form of currency. And the more of that currency you get, now you qualify for this badge. But then you can also have a mentor, that person's mentor, because we're trying to figure out how to scale this to where there's a whole bunch of people there. But then a mentor would look at that and say, you know what, you have earned those 50 points, and I agree. And so you could have maybe a peer badge and then a validated peer badge, or maybe you wait until it's validated. But somehow you can, I think we need to respect the communities, but they could always rig it, say, I'll vote for you if you vote for me, which is why you might want the validation on top of that.
So any other questions about DIY STEM? All right. Well, I'll walk us through the website really quick. Again, remember we're in pilot phase right now. We're in our third location now, our third cohort working through the system right now. If for those of you who have computers in front of you, you can visit the site at diy-stem.org, but I'll have it up on the Adobe Connect screen as well. It's open to the public right now. In fact, everything except for the forums are completely open to the public. I don't know if any of you have experience with creating websites for primary use for individuals 13 and under. Oh boy. COPA is Leviathan. It is just this huge monster that you have to learn about, navigate, and build around. Many of the ideas that we have for DIY STEM, we're still trying to figure out how to do. Many of the things we want to do with mentors, great ideas, wonderful things. It could be great for the DIY STEMers, which we don't have a name for them yet, so I'll call them members or participants or whatever interchangeable term I come up with at the moment. There are great things that we could do with mentors and connecting them with our participants, but we're very limited in what we can do. The sharing email addresses, that's right out. Even with parent permission, you're not allowed to do that. We can get around a lot of things with parent permission, but
we have parents do that.
Yeah,
of us,
and that's one of those things that you've got to work around the system in order to do what you want to do. So some of the things that we've talked about in our overview of DIY STEM we haven't been able to implement, but we're just working through the details of how to do it. So most of this on the front page is information that Kyle has already covered, including the About Us. The real home of stuff for DIY STEM is under the DIY STEM homepage, and this basically gives our participants an overview of what Kyle just told you. What are our badges? What do the different levels of badges mean? So on and so forth. And under Browse Projects right here, we have the actual badges that we have piloting right now. We have 3 different project patches, which Kyle mentioned is where our participants enter into the system. We have the electronic motor, the
Electronic motor's on the left, yeah.
Yeah, the electronic motor, which is a build-your-own motor. You wind the coil, you put in the magnets, you hook it up to a battery, you do everything with this little kit that we purchased from SparkFun, which is a common electronics materials provider. We've got the Introduction to Electronics, which is using an Arduino microcontroller. If you've ever used those before, they're essentially small computers that you can use to do essentially whatever you want to program it to do. It can turn motors on and off, it can operate servos, it can do basic math and computational problems, it can do a lot of things.
Input from sensors.
You can hook it up to Wi-Fi, you can hook it up to Ethernet, you can have photo sensors, you name it can do quite a few different things. Everything from controlling a drone that you build so that it flies on its own, to Roomba that you build for yourself. It can do all those different sorts of things. In fact, at Discovery Space here in State College, the Science Museum for Kids, they have a big pneumatic tube system, and if you look behind the curtain, they've got Arduinos running the entire system for shooting balls out across the museum. And then the third project patch that we have is Motorized Car, which is basically a framework that we use for teaching solar, basic motors, gears and ratios, those sorts of things. It's a really nice kit that was developed by the Society for Automotive Engineers, SAE. Their engineers came up with this cool kit that you can use as a platform for building a lot of stuff. We use it for just a little car, 2 gears, solar panel, and then we ask the participants to go beyond that for the maker metals and think of what you want to do with it.
Comes with a whole set of, many gears of different sizes and.
Yeah, it's got a bag of gears and you can hook up different power supplies to it, battery, solar power, plug into the wall, whatever you want. So to give you an idea of this, let's go ahead for the intro to electronics. I think that's a decent one to look at. And what we do essentially is we have the same breakdown for every. Hey, Kyle. I am not a Mac person, so yeah. So I'm trying to figure out how to scroll the screen here without my
2 fingers.
Two fingers? Yeah. Beautiful. This is what happens when you put a PC person on it, and I'm going to continue to try to go the wrong direction because it's backwards for me. Okay. So you've got the essential same breakdown for each one of these project patches. You've got an overview, which tells the participants, how challenging is this going to be? And we want this to be community generated down the line. So as DIY STEM participants go through the project, they say, oh, that was a 5 out of 5 for me. I really had trouble. Another one said, oh, that was easy. It was a 1 out of 5. And then we kind of get an aggregate score and put it together, and that will be a dynamically generated score, as well as we as DIY STEM think this is a 3 out of 5 to give them that challenge rating. Once we're up to dozens, if not hundreds of projects, these challenge ratings can help them sort through what they may want to do next. You up for a challenge? You just want to get a quick badge. Sort between 1s and 5s. Estimated time for completion, and again, that will be dynamically generated. How much is it going to cost you for the parts? And we try to keep this as minimal as possible. In the pilot, we're using preset kits, but as we move down the line, we'll have alternate parts and such, so you can get into these kits at various price points or free. And then any recommended NATMs, prerequisites that you should do before you get into this project. We provide a very quick background over what this is. So, for instance, we talk about what an Arduino is, what a microcontroller is, what it can do. We tell them the goals for the project. What are you going to be able to demonstrate an understanding of? What NATMs are related to this? So what NATMs may you want to think about doing before you get into this project? And if you don't do them before, they're embedded in the instructions for the project itself, so they can always link out to learn more about these various concepts. Materials, what do you need in order to be able to do this? Recommended tools, if you need anything that's not necessarily required for doing this, but sure would be helpful. And then we get into the build process itself.
Well, this little note, it'll go away. I
Okay.
guess.
So, there we go. So what we do is for each one of the projects, we give a well-defined step-by-step process for walking through this project, beginning to end. We ask questions, thought-provoking questions, perhaps guiding questions throughout. That's the instructional design side of this. We tell them what to do, but we try to have them thinking about each step as they do it. And you'll see as I scroll down through here, we've got screenshots of, here this is a breadboard that's used with an Arduino. And as we move through, I show them how to connect each one of the wires as they go along. There's supporting text telling them what to do. You see the little LEDs get added to this. This project itself is creating a pedestrian crossing. So it's essentially a traffic light with a button. You hit the button, it turns the traffic light from green to yellow to red. When it hits red, the pedestrian crossing light turns to green. Waits 10 seconds, blinks the pedestrian light as a warning, switches the pedestrian light to red, switches the traffic light to green. So it's something that the DIY STEM participants see every single day. Here they're going to wire it and program it beginning to end to do in their lab with an Arduino. And so kind of scroll through, you'll see I embed Ohm's law in here as they're figuring out what sort of resistors to include in on the breadboard. And as we go through, we continue on, and I'll kind of scroll down to the bottom here. It gets more and more complex. And here, they end with the fully wired breadboard and Arduino. Walk them through the whole thing. But that's only half of the project. They also have to program it. So we also get through all the programming for the Arduino and how to program it and walk them again step by step. Purposefully used photos rather than actually written text so that they couldn't copy paste it. I don't know. I remember when I was a kid doing the old basic programming, and I'd get my monthly magazine with a game in it, and there'd be 3 pages with 1,000 lines of code that I'd have to type into basic, and I'd run the program at the end, and I'd have this little guy walking across the screen. I'd build my own programs. Much of what I learned for how to program was in making mistakes in transposing between what I read in the magazine and what I saw on the screen. Oh, I missed that semicolon. Well, I didn't know I missed that semicolon. Now I need to troubleshoot my program. How do you do that? We kind of walk them through troubleshooting here as well. So that's essentially the process of doing the project. Let me give you an example of how we embed the NATMs from a different project here. We'll do the Motorized Car. So I'll show you same sort of setup. Yeah.
I was just say, I can hear a little bit of conversation on the other end. Just wanted people to be aware of that.
Oh, okay. This is just another example of another project, but I'll show you how we embed some of the NATMs in here. So as a student is going through, say they're going through and they're building this car, we say, why exactly would water or grease help with making your car move more quickly? Having a little bit of trouble with it moving, or here we're trying to slide on some of the gears and the wheels. Why would I recommend using water or grease? Is there a difference between them? Maybe you should click on the friction NATM and learn a little bit more. When they do, they get popped out to a page that is up there. Beta. which they should, I have to fix that when I get back to the office, which they should click out to the friction NATM, and there they can learn that knowledge level material. We give them a very basic overview, link them out to already existing content that's out there in the world. This is one of the big ideas we had with DIY STEM. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of great content out there. We wanted to leverage that great content and create a system for recognizing the knowledge and competencies you will gain by working your way through that content. So we link out to YouTube videos. We say, okay, watch these videos. We tell them, what do we expect that you're going to learn while watching these videos? And then at the end, we say, okay, you watch these videos, take a quiz. Show us or demonstrate to us that you know what friction is now at this knowledge level.
I'm sorry, I'm still hearing your conversation. Someone may want to mute their phone. Sorry, and I did have a question from Laura. So in regards to projects, do the kids have to purchase materials? And if so, what are the cost ranges?
Well, so far, we've been supplying the parts, and we submitted 2 NSF grants that were going to give us the parts. What we hope will happen is that there'll be corporate sponsors that are willing to say, like, we'll give you your first $200 worth of parts are free. And I know that sounds kind of like a drug dealer, your first try is free. But we figure once they get started, then they'll be willing to mow lawns or do something to earn the money. But we do realize that is a limit to access. But we do think also the corporate sponsors may step up and sponsor individuals or classrooms or schools. And schools also, we didn't really mention, but we tried to build something that schools would want to incorporate into their science classes or after-school clubs. And so they might use some budget for that. But in general, we try to keep each project under $50. And I know $50 is a lot. And there will be, we started with these 3 to demonstrate, but we need to put some less expensive ones. The motor's like $4, $5?
Yeah, the motor is pretty cheap. And we have again, this is during our pilot, we put up the 3 projects that we thought would be 2 things. Most engaging for students, something that maybe they have not done yet, and also would provide them platforms from which they can do a lot more. Some of the kitchen science type projects that we have in the wings to put up that would be nominal cost or free, those sometimes don't provide you much platform for going beyond. So the 3 projects we have right now are not costly, but they do cost something. Many other projects would be available for free or for minimal cost. One of them that we already did was a coin battery. I don't know if you've ever built a coin battery, but it essentially costs you, doesn't cost you because you can use them afterward, but 2 nickels, and a little bit of what's in your kitchen. So those are some entry-level free projects that can be done, and they'd be mixed in with some of these more costly projects. One of them Kyle mentioned was the Quadcopter. Quadcopter is a really cool project, and I could give them step-by-step instructions for how to do it, but it's probably going to cost them $60, $75. That doesn't mean we wouldn't incorporate it into the system, but it may not necessarily be one of the first things that we put up, particularly for the pilot.
So now, back to our disagreement, I wanted to say, if you learn all the molecules, the atoms and molecules beneath something, then maybe, your equipment would be provided for you. So that's another way to perhaps do this. If, again, a Kiwanis club or, like here in town, it might be AccuWeather or somebody wants to step up and sponsor an elementary school or a classroom and provide the parts. But so I really, one of the things we don't know yet is will they go in and learn, will they just put the projects together, will they bother to go back and earn the other badges? And I think we may need some incentive there.
I have a real quick question about what did you design for in terms of the audience, and do you have other people who jump in and give you their insights, like educators?
So both Kyle and I were middle school teachers, so we have that perspective that we're coming here. coming to this with. We have a broad age range that we are targeting for DIY STEM, from 8 to 18. That's, for those of you who have dealt with that age, that is more than 10 years because the differences between the background knowledge for those groups. However, that 8-year-olds that are performing well beyond that are and the other way around. So what we've tried to do is to hit kind of in the middle, particularly for vocabulary and how things are written. We've really hit for the upper middle school level, 7th, 8th grade reading comprehension, and that may make it more challenging for some. One thing that we always kept an eye on, and for those that we've run this past, other educators, our pilot students, and so on, one of the things we've always been very mindful of is never to speak down to anyone, because there's no quicker way of ostracizing a group of participants than to make them feel like you're treating them like kids. We try to come at them as future STEM professionals, and we try to provide a platform for them to feel like entry-level STEM professionals and teach them. We didn't get much into this, but one of the things that we're trying to do in this is not just to recognize competency within STEM areas, but to actually help them become familiar with how is STEM work done in the real world. What do engineers do? What's the vocabulary they use? What are the careers out there for engineers? How do scientists think? What's the terminology they use? And we try to incorporate that into the way we present materials. Sometimes that can seem advanced, but we've been pleasantly surprised by those who have used the projects so far, which has been all middle school level, correct?
Yeah.
Has that been all middle school? Which has been all middle school level so far. Just quickly, the other thing that I wanted to show, this is the third project patch, the electric motor. I wanted to show a different way that we are also structuring the content to try to get feedback in different delivery, organizational delivery methods for the project's patches. You'll see this one is a numbered list for the well-structured activity, for the steps, rather than the more narrative paragraph display for the other project patches. So it's one of the things we heard in our first pilot, and we thought, okay, well, let's give that a shot, and let's give a different way of giving this content to our members. So that's essentially the badge section. Let me show you one last thing, which is very, very new, which is our contribute section. This is gets into the crowdsourcing side of DIY STEM, and this is an area where we ask participants to create their own project patch, create their own NADA using a form, very basic form, and then submit to us, and then we run it through our review system, and then you'll see all the different parts, just like you saw when we showed the project patches. And then they can submit that badge to us, we review it, tweak it, and then we can put it up and incorporate it into the system. Anything you want to add, Kyle, or anything?
Well, just so our extensions of that we have planned. Come on in.
Oh, hello. How you doing?
Good. Would include like a social networking component where you would be able to find other people who had earned the same badges as you and so on. And again, because a lot of these people are under 13, we have restrictions on what we can do with that. So, but even recommendation engines like the Amazon.com, people who like the electric motors badge also like this badge. And something like you've got 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 4 badges needed for a molecule. If you're in this one badge, you'll get this summary badge, then molecule. So there's a lot of things that can be done with that. We submitted 2 NSF grants, one just kind of hastily in the beginning, without a lot of partners and without a lot of what it takes. And then we submitted another one that we just found out a month ago didn't get funded. But that one we have as partners Mozilla, who are going to help us work on the social networking aspects of this. We get it funded. And then the American Association of University Women were going to partner with us and say they would take it across to kids across across the country. We're trying to partner with the Skyhook Foundation, which is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's group. He's trying to get inner-city kids interested in STEM, and that's another. And then we just talked last week to the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, who found us through the guy who's piloting now in North Carolina, and they're interested. So if we get a partnership with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, that answers the "if you build it, will they come" question. And then with partners like Mozilla to help us think about some of the social networking piece, and they're actually producing, what do they call it, hives in different cities where they have like maker spaces. Then there's the whole maker. The guy we're working with in North Carolina is self-proclaimed geek dad, who is one of these makers. He's created a maker space in his own town and things like that. So we can really hook into the maker movement, and I think there's a lot of benefit that will happen there. I'd also like to see us get to some more, take it apart kinds of things and build something out of scrap. Find an old vacuum cleaner and, don't plug it back in after you open the part. Use some of the parts to do this and that, and really get kids into the hacking, trying to find something and turn it in to do something else. That's why the Arduino's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's $50, but once you've got that, we could do any number for that $50 thing. There could be all kinds of challenges and, badges that they could earn with that.
Yeah, the CAR framework is a great engineering base to build things out of. The Arduino is a great brain for controlling whatever you build. So that's one of the big reasons we have those two side by side as two of our three initial projects, because they just open up a world of possibilities for the maker metals.
So what do you think? What advice do you have for us? What thoughts?
I guess it's kind of an open question. We've talked about this quite a bit, so I know a little bit more about the project than probably most folks do. But I'm curious what educators think when you bring this idea to them and this sort of decoupling, I guess, of the atoms and the molecules, right? So you could build things without ever sort of having to learn the foundational knowledge, but clearly you've learned enough to do something. Are people okay with that? Are people accepting of that new idea? Or is there a lot of sort of, I guess what you proposed is your idea initially, Kyle, was you have to go through these steps first, then you build your first project.
Yeah, we haven't had too many interactions with those. We had a few teachers lined up to be the, if we got that NSF grant, we had some school districts ready to do a large-scale implementation. But our first two sites really came from they put in a STEM after-school program that was falling on its face, and the kids were not excited, and the kids were ready to bail. So the superintendent called me and said, "Is your thing ready? Let's put it in here." So we did, and so they just kind of implemented it as an after-school program. It turned out the after-school program was for students at risk. So it wasn't, it was I think that, it did good things for some, and some kids really got into it, but it wasn't a great opportunity for us to learn how teachers feel about it. Then there was the second place they took it. The people there ordered more and took it into a center in Erie, Pennsylvania, for immigrants. And so these are people immigrating from primarily African nations, I think, and other places as well. But this is like a place where when people land in Erie and they don't necessarily even speak the language. So we didn't develop those for people who don't speak English. We assumed kind of reading at a 6th grade level as a prerequisite. So I don't know. I think teachers are going. I believe, as a former teacher myself, and Brad does too, that teachers will like it because the content of those atoms is what's on the test. So I think the teachers will see it as a way to get their students to spend their discretionary time doing stuff with academic value. So I suspect that, and I've had some conversations with teachers, and they say, yeah, that makes sense to me, but we haven't actually implemented it in a school yet.
Well, a little bit of background as well. We've also, that we provided any of the partners asked for, we've aligned all of our projects in the NATMs with state standards or national standards if they exist so that the teacher who may choose to implement this in the classroom can do so however they would like, and still be able to show, look, I'm meeting our state standards here by doing this. And one of the ideas of DIY STEM is we want it to be flexible, to be implemented in whatever way is best going to suit that particular audience. So a teacher may come in and that day they're going to say, today in class we're going to do these 3 atoms. They can do that if they want. It's not necessarily how we recommend that they do it, but they can. There's nothing stopping them. Or they can come in and say, we're going to do this project, and I expect you to complete 5 atoms during, or to earn 2 molecules, or whatever it may be. So I think the flexibility of the system helps to hold off any of those great criticisms for those who may not be comfortable with doing experiential project-based learning rather than starting from the knowledge level moving up.
And I also like the fact that by doing that, it shows kids that, you know what, there's probably a YouTube video out there for anything I want to learn. It also will train them to be independent. Sorry.
2 questions. One from Karen Johnson is she wants to promote it into her community. Should she start with a superintendent or a department head?
Yes.
Okay.
And Karen, if you like, we'll be happy to help you with that. What community are you with?
And she's typing something in.
We do have some equipment on hand, so we, at the end of the year, you know how you run out of it, you have to spend it or lose the money. We went ahead and bought equipment that we can make available for a pilot here and there.
So we see little helicopters
Hazel.
flying around outside.
She's in Hazleton, lives in Stroudsburg, so
Right.
too.
Yeah, we'd be happy to talk with them. We like to introduce Skype kind of a setup format, and then if it gets traction, we'll go out and demonstrate. Brad and I go out and we show them. We have them, the adults do the projects, and then they're ready to pretty much implement them.
My second question is, are there parameters on content areas?
No. So we're saying STEM, but what I in my mind, everybody is passionate. So one of the things I saw with MOOCs is there's so many people who love what they're doing and want to share it with the world. I think that, I'd love to see entomologists do it about entomology, and everybody, the people who know it and love it, care about it, just volunteer it. So I think this crowdsourcing thing, as soon as we start sort of pushing that, get some traction on that, I asked Brad to try and get those forms up for this meeting, and he did. But those are just brand new. But I really want people to take it in all kinds of different directions and have students sort of search for what they're looking for, and having just every time they log in a recommendation, hey, have you thought about X? So Singapore has a young scientist club, and they have, a young entomologist badge and a young, everything, ecologist badge and biologist and chemist and all these. But you get one badge by doing a certain number of things. And they have, Singapore is small, so the kids take it to their teachers to look at what they do. So it's an outside of school thing, but because the government owns all the teachers, they can say, okay, you review this.
I guess I'm curious, could you envision a young historian badge or a young linguist badge or something like that?
Well, there's nothing that would keep this infrastructure from working for all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would definitely be under a different banner. There'd be a DIY history site or something of that sort.
Oh.
But one of the things that we're building here is an infrastructure for doing this, for digital badging. I didn't get into the technical aspects of this. We're working on a WordPress base with a plugin called Badge OS, as well as BuddyPress and a number of other things. If anybody's ever interested in that, I can talk through my experiences setting up that infrastructure. But this could easily be moved over and used for any sort of content that you like.
Yeah, I will say linguistics has more STEM than you, right?
Yeah.
I know Robbie had a question.
Good point.
So you were talking about having schools use this, and I guess one of the questions that I have is there an interface for the instructor or the teacher so that they can kind of group their students and monitor their progress, their badges, where they're at? I just wondered if there's anything like that you have built into your site.
Yes and no. Yes, it is in beta right now. I'm not using it with the person who's piloting it right now, but it's in there to do fun. trying to log in, I couldn't remember that password. Kyle just logged in so you can see what someone who's logged in will see, and they'll list the badges for all of the users. Administrators, those who have been given, we've set up different levels of access for mentors, for what we call local leads, and so on and so forth. And then for us, what a person with administrator access can do is they can log in, and they will see their students, if you will. They'll see their class set, and they can monitor progress there. They'll see what badges have been earned. With limits, again, there are certain limits in sharing information even within the system that are restricted by COPA. But as much as we can do, we have sharing across groups. We have that with the person who's piloting right now. His question, yes, is I really need to be able to manage this. He gave me some requests for how he wanted to do it, and that's what we've started implementing.
Okay, great.
And Laura had a question on the phone.
I do, thanks. So I work with middle school and high school earth science teachers in Philadelphia, and you've probably heard Philadelphia is operating under a doomsday model right now where all after-school clubs and activities are canceled, there's no sports teams, and so one of the things I hear from the teachers is that the students are really frustrated because they feel they can't do anything to build up, in essence, their resume for when they apply to college, because they now can no longer say they're part of the chess club or student council or anything like that. And so I think the badging offers a great opportunity, especially when we're talking about the model of badges being for recognition, award, and competency. But my bigger question, which may not have an answer, is how do we get institutions like Penn State University to recognize students that have completed these badges? Because when students apply to Penn State, I mean, our admissions office doesn't even read their application essay. And so how do we get that kind of recognition part for students completing these badges recognized by higher ed institutions?
That's a good question, and I think it would really come down to the academic program level. So electrical engineering, I think, would look at this and differently than sort of like the admissions officers. So I don't know enough about how admissions works to know whether the program has any input, or whether I know at the graduate school level you do. You have a whole resume and everything, and because these are badges, graduate students can actually put them in the Mozilla backpack and put them in LinkedIn and Facebook and things like that. So they will be a currency that lives even outside the system. And we're thinking that when kids get to be 14, we might have a badge mitzvah or something. We're not going to call it that, but in some place at which time we just go ahead and take all their badges that are internal to the system and make them available to the world. But I think it's a really good question. Every time I've talked with professors, they say, "Oh yeah, I'd love to have that information." So I don't know. That's a great question, and we'll have to figure that out over time. Thank you.
I will say, Laura, this is Chris Stubbs. We are trying to work with our prior learning assessment office here now on a small pilot with Kyle and others to try and answer that question, or at least set a precedent for answering that question. It may take a while to get to admissions level, but we're working on it.
Well, that's really a good point. And so they're really pushing the credit by examination and credit by portfolio. So it could be that anybody who's done all this would be able to just test out of some of the basic electronics courses and things like that. And then if badging takes at a university level, then a course won't necessarily be one thing. It'll be a series of badges. And so even if they can't test out of the whole course, they might test out of 14 of the 17 badges. And then just have to focus on, the little bits and be done and be able to go through it much more quickly and less expensively.
And I would imagine that if you've earned the badges, especially the project badges, you have the video that's showing you created your motors and whatnot.
That's right. And so the badges, because they link out to evidence, the badge itself becomes a little transcript that links out to that evidence. So especially if we start using the L3 system once we get that ready here that we're building at Penn State, if we end up getting enough funding that we can host everybody's videos and things like that. So. Or then we may have them put them on YouTube and just put the links out to YouTube probably for stuff like that.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one. As from the teacher's perspective, when I look at this, one thing that I want to do is say, what are the standards, where are they, and how are they being met? So my question is that available to the teacher? Where they say, hey, this is the project, but what are the standards being met? Because as I read up my lesson plan, I need to have some, credibility,
So, under each one of the badges, there's what are the expectations for learning for each one of them? So if you click on any of the NADMs, there's a short bullet list of what are the expectations for learning, for demonstrating competency in any of these areas. For someone who is coming in and looking at the badges that someone has earned, that goes into the framework for the digital badge itself, which is a list of metadata behind the badge.
Okay.
So say you were to have a student come into your classroom and say, I've already got this, I want an alternate assignment for, this unit on alternating current. Here's my badge show I did this. You can click on it, you can see, here were the learning standards that were set by DIY STEM. Here is a video or a test score, as well as the questions and responses and response rate for their assessment that they did for that.
So we really need to do something here on the teacher's page, or as a pull down on the teacher page, where they can just pull up a standard and say, you got anything for this?
Yeah.
And it would come up then.
For right now, since we're in a closed pilot, we do this in personal interactions with the people that are approaching us. As we scale, as we start to move out of this phase of pilot, later pilot, or just opening this up to everyone, those are some of the things that we plan on adding to the system. And I agree, it's going to be critical for people adopting this within the classroom environment.
Right. So my other question is, so you said that you've got the state and the national standards there, so does that include the Common Core standards or the current ones that are in place?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever is in place right now, we try to align it with whatever is there for national, but as you know, it's sparse for some areas right now.
Mm-hmm.
So for those
just came out too. A lot of this preceded that. But,
yeah.
I mean, they were in draft form, but
so then
now that they're a little more solid, we can hook to them.
From there, we default to Pennsylvania, as well as a few of the states that have been integral in the development of the Common Core.
Mm-hmm.
So we also align with those states. In total, I think for most of them, which we don't have it for the most recent badge, but for most of them, we have 5 or 6 different states. And quite honestly, the standards are very, very similar across most. It's just a matter of going through the standards and plugging in the numbers.
Well, now if we link to the Common Core, even if they're different, they'll be able to what do you call it, crosswalk them to the Common Core or the next generation science standards.
So I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, but we are at 1:02. So are there any questions from anyone? Well, if something comes up, I'm sure Kyle and
you know how
Brad.
to reach us. We're in there.
Yeah, and again, particularly if you have technical questions for how we actually set up the framework and what our plans are, our roadmap is down the line, I'd be more than glad to talk to you about that if you're looking at doing your own type of digital badging system. This is a quickly developing field as far as the technological infrastructure that's being built. There's a lot that you can do now that you couldn't do 3 months ago.
And Laura, was it you that was talking about Philadelphia, or was that?
Oh, that was Laura.
Okay. So we did send a kit. There was interest from, I forget.
You can put me on spot.
Yeah, I'll find out. But there was somebody that was engaged in some of the after-school programs that were spread across the Philly area who got excited about this, and we sent her a kit or two to go ahead and work with that. And I could try and reconnect with her, but I have a feeling she's been reeling from all the things you described. But
yeah, she was out of the mayor's office and also worked with Girls Science, GIRLZ, or Girls STEM organization.
That might be through the Franklin Institute, maybe too. Sounds familiar.
I think it did have a connection there. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. And if you have any other ideas for us, if you're inspired to go create a badge, go over that. If you want to earn badges, you can create an account, and you can earn all the NADMs. And if you want to get some of the hands-on stuff to play with, we can make that available to you. You'll want it back.
And they can contact you through DIY-STEM.org.
Yes.
Yeah, we have contact on there. And right now, when you try to, again, because we're closed and we've got minors in the program, you try to create an account, there'll be about a day delay for your account to be approved because it comes to us first. I do some checking to make sure you are who you are, and then I'll approve you.
But if you want, we can tell you your credit check numbers when we,
Yeah, I'll just need your credit card number and a few other forms of ID.
As long as you
Trust
don't do
me.
it through Craigslist.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
You guys.